Tim O'Connor is a performance coach with more than 30 years of experience in golf as both an author and a coach. You may know his voice and his incredible depth of wisdom as the co-host of the Swing Thoughts podcast, or one better, maybe you've read some of his fascinating work, especially his latest book, Getting Unstuck, 7 Transformational Practices for Golf Nerds. And in today's conversation, Tim and I unpack why so many golfers stay trapped in the same frustrating cycles year after year. Tim explains why being stuck has less to do with mechanics and more to do with unconscious patterns, repetitive thinking, fear-based control, and a disconnect from the physical experience of playing golf. If you've ever chased swing tips mid-round, sabotaged a great start, overthought every shot, or felt like your scores no longer reflect your ability, this conversation is going to hit home. And I'm excited to share it with you. So without further ado, let's dive in. Please help me welcome Tim O'Connor to the show. Tim, you talk about it a lot. You've written countless words about it. Getting stuck. What does being stuck actually feel like internally for a golfer? And how can someone recognize it before their results begin to expose it?
Well, commonly what I found, drawing on my own experience as a total nut bar obsessive golfer, is we're doing the same thing over and over again, even though we know that these things are contrary to good performance. For sake of example, let's say a golfer's hitting a right-handed golfer's hitting his drivers right into the trees. So what does he or she do? Usually they'll go into fix-it mode. They'll go into try to harken back to some swing thoughts that worked in the past, or maybe a swing tip that they saw in Golf Digest or somewhere. And so while they're playing a game of golf, they'll try and fix their swing. And that just never works very well at all. So, but that behavior, a lot of golfers will know that's what they do, and they know it doesn't help them, but they do it all the time. It happens to us in so many parts of our golf and in our life, is that we engage in behaviors over and over again, like we're kind of in this loop that we can't get out of. And so that's kind of the feeling of being stuck. Also the feeling that, how come I can't break a scoring barrier, whether it be, 110, 190, 80, how come I can't get below that? How come I can't close a tournament? So many, I coach a lot of golfers, everyone from amateurs to college players. And it's just a common experience that in a casual game or in sort of low stakes tournaments, they could perform, but when they want to really bring it and close a tournament, they can't. So getting stuck is just the feeling of, I want to make progress, I want to go forward, but I'm spinning my wheels.
Yeah, like what I really hear, which I love, is that the individual who feels stuck knows what to do, but continues to do what is generating the poor outcome and the stuck feeling over and over. So it's almost like a resistance to doing different. So we go back to that example of the right-handed golfer constantly pushing, dare I say, maybe even slicing into the woods, trying to fall back on a previous swing thought or swing feel. What is the solution? Someone comes to you with that exact problem or a similar variation. Where do you initiate that conversation to create a different outcome?
I always start with this, and I always sort of make sort of a joke. It's the A word, awareness. Start with awareness. You cannot change what you're not aware of. And most of us are not aware of our thoughts. We're not aware of how we get trapped in the same thoughts. There's neuroscientists say that we have upwards between 30,000, 70,000 thoughts a day. 69,000 of which we had the same ones the day before.
Yeah.
So we get caught in this loop of thinking, which sparks feeling, and we get in this cycle going. But unless we're aware of that, unless we're aware of the behaviors that we're into, we cannot change. So it starts with that. It's like, oh, I'm doing that thing again, in which I'm trying to fix my swing or look for some solution. And once you have that awareness, then you can respond. So it starts with that. And so usually, I mean, most golfers find after they've been playing for a while, once you kind of get back past the intermediate stage and you start to, have a pretty good swing and whatnot, most golfers have the experience when they let go of trying hard, trying to do it right, trying to make the perfect swing, get my right elbow in the right spot, turn my left hip, choose whatever tip you want.
Yeah.
Once you just sort of let go of that and allow yourself to swing, Lee Trevino, the great legendary golfer, said, dance with the one that brung you, meaning you just show up with whatever swing you got that day and then just try and hit shots. That's the key to golf is hitting shots, not having the perfect swing. If you got a shot you want to hit low to the green, then you just try your best to do that. And that is the way we can play some good golf. But when you're stuck in this fix-it mode, you become hyper aware of what you're doing, and it just leads to tension, more anxiety, and frustration.
So you're speaking to an audience who is largely composed of the type A fixers, the tinkerers that you're beginning to describe. And I always tell my audience and my clients I work with, a lot of your superpowers, we'll take the entrepreneur listening, the ambition, the tenacity, the work ethic. It gets you really far. It's responsible for a lot of successes in your life, yet simultaneously, there's always a point at which that superpower becomes a kryptonite. In this case, that tinkering, that need to fix, it ultimately becomes your own worst enemy or behavior. So someone who has that propensity, maybe it's all they know, where do you begin helping them unlearn and let go of that to see another option?
Well, in terms of golf, what the key thing that I find that most people, what helps them the most is when they actually experience their swing as a physical sensation. And it's very hard to imagine, but most golfers have never actually felt their swing. They usually try to, whether they're on the range or they're on the carpet at home with the putter or they're playing the game, they're thinking of something they need to do. We'll go back to that. Let's say I'm going to finish my backswing. There's one thing. And then I'm going to let my right elbow fall in front of my right hip. I'm going to turn my left hip and I'm going to finish at full height, transferring my weight. And that's not an exaggeration of the stuff that people think of. It's crazy.
No.
But when you're thinking, when you're caught in your mind, in your frontal cortex, when you're thinking, you're disconnected from your body. You cannot think and feel what's going on at the same time. So what I work with clients around who are struggling with this is let's make golf, which it is, a physical experience. So it could be feeling the club head for the first time. It could be just put your attention, there's another A word, into your hands. It could be just look at the tee and Titleist or whatever. So let's have a physical experience of what's actually really happening. And you'd be shocked how many golfers have never felt what their swing feels like because they're trapped in their head. So once you can get them to have an experience, a physical experience, what the club felt like, the collision into the ball, all that stuff, then they start to have a different experience. And most people actually really like it. They like the feeling. It leads to better ball striking, all that kind of stuff. And so once you get them feeling, then we can start leading them down that road in which they can start to get unhooked from that addiction to thinking so much.
Very well said. I really appreciate and admire that. So I'm curious. Hypothetical example. So play with me here. If I dropped you into a golfer's life for 30 days, let's say someone stuck around a 12 handicap, their immediate goal is to break 80. Two-part question. Number one, what would you have this individual stop doing immediately? And two, what would you have them start doing immediately to break that goal?
In terms of stopping, it would be stop taking a swing tip, a swing thought to the golf course. Just let that go. Just as I said before, just come to the golf course, whatever you have. Now, I'll give you a great example of that, which I learned through doing improv work for 2 years. I used to think that whenever the instructor would give me it's always we do games in improv. I always thought you had to have some kind of strategy on what to do, and I would always just screw up the sketch with my fellow improv people because I didn't allow what I had to just spill out and allow. I was just trying. So I screwed it up. So the same thing happens in golf. You just show up with what you got and you do your best. So that's the stopping part. The starting part would be, I would say, it could be something like, it could be, let's approach the game like you have like we talk about playing one shot at a time. It's a cliche of golf. Well, if you approach golf as the golf course is asking you a question that you need to answer. So you have a shot into a green. The question is, where do you want this to go? Where do you not want this to go? What would be the optimal trajectory? What might be the right shape? And you just do your best to hit a shot to answer that question. And then you're done with that shot. And then you give your full attention to your next shot and answer the questions because you hit the ball. Let's say you hit the ball on the green. Okay, great. So now the course is asking you a question of, okay, I've got a 25 footer. It's downhill a bit. It looks like it's got a bit of a slope from right to left. So what do I need to do to get that ball into the hole? So it would be, there's a number of different ways, but that would be one.
Fantastic. I mean, excuse me, am I supposed to respond to yes and? It's not the rule of improv?
Well done, sir.
I'll tell you what, it might be episode 30 or 35 of this show is all about the yes and framework. I worked alongside a guy, Travis Thomas, who was a leadership and performance coach who did a lot of improv. And this was 15 years ago. And he always would teach and joke about that with us colleagues and whatnot. And it really stuck with me just in terms of how applicable it is as a life skill to apply that yes and philosophy. So I've had 150 shows on this podcast so far. That personally is one of my favorites I've ever recorded. So it's fun to hear that you have 2 years of that background.
Yeah, well, it was one of the most interesting things I did because I knew as someone who worked with golfers, and I also, as I said, a total obsessed nut bar golfer myself, but I'm also a musician. I play bass in a band and I do, public speaking and working. So performance is a big part of what I do and everything. So I thought improv would be a really great way to sharpen those skills. And what I found is that it just really sharpened my awareness, particularly of those behaviors that would undermine me in performance. And that would be things like trying to do it right. And like I said, that example of I would hear the instructor give instructions and I would immediately start to plan what I would do in the sketch and all that. And I would just undermine it because it's about allowing something to come up. Someone says something and then you have to yes and to it. Yep. You have to respond in a way. So if I have preconceived notions of what I'm going to do, I undermine the whole enterprise.
Yeah. And you bring up a good word that I have a couple synonyms: allowing, surrendering, letting go. Paradoxically, we know the more you let go of control, the more control you gain. And I personally struggled with this a lot, still do on occasion. For the listener who that really vibes with them, they struggle with that control aspect of the game. Where do you help them turn their awareness and attention to find more ease in letting go?
Well, a lot of times I'll just ask them to reflect on their own experience and perhaps in different performance scenarios. So you mentioned that you work with a lot of type A, C level type of executives. Well, a lot of them have found the reason they're at that level is that they have been able to perform in different levels, particularly with stress, whether it's presenting to an AGM, perhaps it's doing a sales presentation, something like that. And you ask them, how much were you focused on doing things the right way, or maybe following a script very tightly and all that? And most of them say, well, I didn't. I've been doing this for 20 years and I just let it happen and allowed. And so when they reflect on that, they go, oh, why wouldn't that work in golf? And once they can reflect on their own experience, they've had some success, they can see, oh, yeah, you're right. Now, the problem, I'll just be brief on this one, is that unfortunately, golf is part of a culture. And that culture tells us, I mean, we have this tsunami of information coming to us through, these stupid addictive things we keep in our pockets here. And I'm as addicted as everyone else. That tells us there are the right ways and the wrong ways to do things. And as adults, we want to do it the right way. And particularly men, we want to look good. We don't want to feel, it's a squishy word for most men, shame, that, we look bad. We don't know what we're doing. We want to look competent. So what do? We fall back on measures that we think will keep us safe. So we try to do all the right things. And so it's just kind of operating in a fear-based way. And again, back to the executive who's got experience in executing at a high level in a performance way, they can relate to that and go, oh yeah, I don't need to be afraid. And I can let things go. And as you say, you can use whatever words you want: surrender, allow.
Such a timely response, one I personally appreciate, because if you recall, moments before I hit the record button, I tell you straight up, I don't have a script for this. I've got a couple areas. I pride myself on doing my research and prep. And that's a good reminder for me that I can surrender, let go with the flow, trust myself. And as I'm listening, I'm like, yeah, why can't I bring that exact thing to setting my hands at the top of my backswing and just trusting I can let it go and swing fluidly? So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. But there's all kinds of really interesting research into how the brain works, and particularly around physical movements. And so there's kind of like we have an open psych. I'm not getting the word exactly right, but it's an open sort of connection and closed. And it's kind of works the opposite. So when we're trying to, say, engage in an activity like hitting a ball at regular speed, but introduce a thought, say at the top of my backswing, I'm going to pause, like our good friend Cameron Young, we watched in the Masters, that pause, amazing, eh? So someone say, I'm going to pause at the top and then I'm going to transfer my weight. Well, when you're swinging at whether it be half speed or full speed, that trying to introduce that thought interferes with the process of physical movement. It's like you're throwing sand in the gears and it just won't happen. However, but you can make changes in your golf swing if you're choosing to do that, if you swing very slowly. You cannot, and you feel what you're doing. But if you're trying to do it at even half speed or, to regular speed, that's why we run into trouble when we're trying to fix our swing. And so that's why if you just go with what you got on the golf course, then you'll do much better. I'll just go on a little bit more. There's a very cool interview with Victor Hovland, and basically he was answering a question of a reporter asking, how do you, what do you do when your golf swings, you're not hitting it great on the golf course? And he said, well, you just adapt. So if you're tending to pull it left that day, well, maybe aim a little bit more right. It's as simple as that. You just try to adapt with what you got. Now, if you got a two-way miss going, well, that might be harder. But the game is not. There's no great secret to this game, and there's no secret sauce to getting into the zone or anything like that. But generally, the more I'll go back to your word, And you see, men hate this stuff, really. The idea of surrender. Are you kidding?
Mm-hmm.
Run away. That doesn't sound like what men do. We're supposed to be ride our horse and into battle, and we're gonna wrestle this to the ground. But when you allow things to happen, we then can access this natural talent and skill that we already have. I mean, if you probably, because of your podcast, you probably draw on the same people as I do. And our show, we get very good golfers to amateurs. So we get men who shoot anywhere from 70s to 85, 90ish or so. If you could shoot 90, you're a competent golfer. You've already got a fairly functional swing. And with women, you shoot 100 or so, the same thing. So when you just go to the golf course and allow that to happen and hit your shots and just do your best, good things can happen. That said, you still need to work on your awareness of things like fundamentals, like alignment, ball position, posture, things like that. And yes, you can improve your game if you work in little segments on areas of improvement. Everyone wants to improve their ball striking.
So take us a step further, because coming back to that Lee Trevino quote and even the Victor Hovland example, you just this is the swing that you've shown up with today. You make it work, and I love how you reiterated there isn't some secret sauce at the top level. That still the adaptability is as strong as ever. Talk to me about your approach or your stance on the warm up period. Before a round, the goal is to get out there on the course, to trust, to surrender, to let it go, to not be Mr. Fix-It or Mr. Tinkerer. How do you educate, let's say, your clients on creating a warm-up routine prior to a round that sets them up for success and gives them the chance to play to their potential?
Okay. First off, I always allow, I always have a discussion with golfers about what type of person are you and how can you be true to yourself? And so if you're someone who thinks it's necessary to hit through the bag from wedge to driver, now, you might go wedge, 8-iron, 6-iron, 4 hybrid driver, fine. That's fine. But there's also people who want to just hit a few putts, hit a few wedge shots, maybe hit a couple of drivers, and they're good to go. Or you're like Bruce Litsky from the 70s and 80s who never went to the range. So, but golfers have this, a lot of golfers have this self-consciousness that they have to do it right. So a lot of them have this idea that they have to go to the range, an hour in advance and do all this stuff. And you don't. You just do what feels right to you. So to me, okay, so there's that bit. So be true to yourself, to what you feel is will make you comfortable. But they call it a warm-up for a reason. You want to warm up your body. That's it. And one of the things is no one keeps score in the warm-up, okay? So your idea is to go there, get yourself physically warmed up. I know lots of players who they'll even take a towel, they'll lie on the ground because they don't have time to go in the locker room, and they'll do some stretching or some yoga type stuff. Yeah. And people will look at you weird. Well, screw them. Who cares? But get that body warmed up, and that's the key thing there. Hit some shots, get used to what the club feels. And yeah, you might start to have a sense of what your dominant shot might be that day. So once you start hitting some irons or drive, and you notice that, let's say you normally draw the ball, but it's hanging out to the right that day. Well, that's your shot that day. No, it's not a time to fix that. And just the last thing I'll say about a warm-up is you might hit a few shots where you're going to imagine yourself on the first 2 or 3 holes if you know the course. So might hit a driver, then a 7-iron, then you got a par 3, you're going to hit. But, always have a target in mind. You can also create a fairway with trees in the distance or with flags on the range. And the last thing I would say is leave yourself some time to putt. And when you putt, just get a feel for the green, how the ball's rolling, that kind of thing. Putt to the fringe is a really great way to do it.
Yeah.
But I would say end your warm-up as if you're going to do 3 putts, as if that's what you're doing on the course. What I'm saying is that you're going to putt as if there's consequence for this. So you say you have a 20-footer, you leave it 2 feet short, you mark it, you go through your routine. And so you do that with about 3 more putts, because a lot of times people will go from their warm up to the golf course, and now there's a shift in what they're thinking, and now it matters. And if you haven't prepared yourself for the fact that now to you, it matters, you're keeping score, you're not ready for it. So that's just a little way to get yourself ready to move into, say, competition mode.
I think you just gave so many of our listeners permission to perhaps lessen their warm-up routine or at least do different. I'm so grateful you shared that. Candidly, my listeners know I golfed a good amount in like elementary, middle school, a little in high school. Then I didn't touch a club for 16 years. And when I started playing again, like I'm that exact example. I just recall when I was younger, you go through your bag every other club. Maybe one day it's odd, one day it's even irons. And then you go to the putting green, you chip and you putt. That's just all I ever knew. And I started to recognize my type A tendencies coming out. It was taking me 60 to 70 minutes. I got to drive to the club. I've got a newborn. I can't be gone that long. But there was an internal friction to doing different for a while until I started coaching myself. Why are you doing it this way? Where does it come from? So I'm so grateful you shared that. It's a good reminder for me and everybody listening.
Yeah, well, I'll give you 2 really good examples. So I used to coach the University of Guelph golf team, and one of the best players in the province, a guy named Charles Fitzsimmons. He's actually a sports psychologist, PhD, and it was really interesting. The guys on my team and the women would want to be on the range an hour before, and they're earnestly hitting shots, doing that thing we just talked about, going through the bag, all that. Well, Charles would usually show up on the range about 20 minutes before his tee time. And he just sort of wriggle around a bit. I forget the name of that Spanish golfer. He plays on the Champions Tour. He's such a character. He's got like the ponytail and the cigars. I forget his name. He's just a real character. But like he just kind of wiggle around a bit, just get himself warmed up. And he might hit half a dozen shots while talking to teammates and other people. And then he'd saunter over to the first tee, talk with everybody, and then just nuke it down the fairway. And, Charles, he won a lot of events like that. So, he just had that approach. But also I coach a high school player, and he's like a lot of high school players become very, very good, very fast. And so like this young man could shoot 67s and like this, but once he went to tournaments, he thought he had to do this long warm up. And I went, Max, just do what you want to do. And he says, well, I don't even like warming up. I said, well, just do what you need to do, man. And so he didn't even really, he might go to the range a little bit and maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and then he'd go and then he could perform. So Max started to play the way Max plays, not like everyone expects him to do or what is the right way to do it. We get trapped into this right way of doing it. It's like putting the shackles on.
Yeah, really well said. So building off of that, you've been coaching and around the game for a long period of time, enough to see some of these common patterns repeat themselves. I'm curious, what's one of the most, let's say, predictable ways that golfers sabotage a breakthrough right before it's about to happen?
Sabotage a breakthrough. Well, I would say a lot of times people want to nail down the exact thing that they're doing. So let's say someone has a couple of rounds in which they had a particular swing thought. It could be, we'll come back, and usually it's something technical in their swing. So let's go with someone felt that they transferred their weight. So they felt at the top of the swing, they felt a good portion of their weight, again, the right-hander had come in to their trail leg, and then they really felt that, wow, they made this nice transference, posted up as a lot of people say now, onto that left leg. And so he has a good round or even a good 9 and so he thinks, this is the thing. This is my thing. I'm going to join the tour now. My index is going to drop. I'm going to wax all my buddies and win the money, all this. And so then they go out, and so they become, this is the thing they fixate on, and then they go out and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work again, and they wonder, like, what happened to this magic thing went poof. And there's science there, because it's not into working memory. It's just something that they're thinking about, and now their body works differently. So a lot of times golfers will sabotage themselves by thinking about it's a specific swing move. And sometimes we just kind of get lucky that, in that day that where we're moving, and it feels, but it's rarely the thing. It's
Yeah.
everything. It's a whole.
Yeah.
Golf is technical, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and social. It's all those things. So if you take it down to just one thing, technical, well, then you're not paying attention to the other five.
Yeah. I love that example. And it's something I found, like, it can be so difficult to determine what was actually responsible for that really great round or the string of great rounds. And I could draw back on my poker experience a lot. And when I used to play professionally, like, it was really easy to mistake a very profitable session as a great, oh, I'm the best player in the world, I made all the right decisions. But that's why, I had a coach to go unpack those decisions and be like, actually, you made 15 horrible decisions, but variance was on your side and the numbers worked out in your favor. And similarly on a golf course, whether it's one of those 6 things in place or a couple good lies, bouncers, or as we often joke as country club members, members bounce off the trees that should have been OB, but somehow it's in the fairway. Cameron Young got a good taste of that a couple times this last weekend. There's always
Oh,
so
yeah,
much
yeah.
more to it. And golf, at least in my experience, it can be difficult to pinpoint, which is why you have to focus on continuing to improve your whole self, because you bring your whole self to the course.
Yeah, right. Well, the word that I'm going to glom onto that you use there was variance. I mean, no one operates at an optimal level all the time. It's part of being human. Like, we're flawed beings. It just things happen all the time. So we're flawed, but we also have all these gifts. And the more we develop our skill, then we're able to perform better in whatever we're at. But we're always going to have variance. And so that's why one of the things I tell golfers is stop trying to make birdies. Seriously, stop trying to make birdies, because usually what ends up happening is you end up hitting it too far past, and then you make a 3-putt, which is a totally unforced error. So you have to allow for the variances that sometimes the ball will come up a little bit short. That's fine. You tap in for, par, or for your bogey. And other times it'll go maybe a bit past, but sometimes a bit further past, but it'll balance out in the wash. And so variance is a great way to look at it over the long term. Look at Rory McIlroy. He's, talk about variance. 2 amazing rounds, Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday, variance showed up. In terms of some decisions he made that weren't that great. Number 11, oh my gosh, and he had the lefts going, and then he had a range session and kind of got it figured out a little bit, and then it balanced out for him. I'll just leave you with this one part about we're on variance. So
Please.
Scott Fawcett, I think, is this wonderful guy who has the decade system. And I love what he says about putting. He says, sometimes the hole gets in the way.
I was thinking the same thing as you said, that I've had Scott on here many times, and that resonated immediately.
Yeah, he's that guy has done so much, I think, in terms of allowing golfers to reduce the pressure on themselves because of what he calls expectation management. And when we expect ourselves to be perfect and look good and always play well, you're setting yourself up for some pretty crappy golf through that. So if you I mean, that's like I was talking to one of my college players this week, and he's in a qualifier, and he talks about he's 1 under, cruising around, I forget, 7 or 8 holes, and he makes a double bogey. And then he makes a bogey because he's still sort of upset about it. Yep. And I said, double bogeys happen to everybody. Walter Hagen a legend of, I think the 1920s golfer. He just said, I expect, I make one double bogey a round. And when it comes, I go, okay, there it is, done, and move on.
I like that. So I'd love to hear, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the book you've written, what was your experience like writing this particular book? And this is coming from an author currently working on another book myself, and just loving how challenging yet rewarding the writing process is. So my question for you, Tim, is what's one thing you learned about yourself in writing this book?
Now, you're referring to the Getting Unstuck book?
Correct. Yes, I probably should have included the title, but there you go. Thank you.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Okay. What did I learn about myself? I learned that it's okay to have a plan, and it's sort of two things, and not to be so worried about doing it right. So this was the first book that I wrote from my personal, professional, and experiential, there's a bit of redundancy here, experience. Most of the other books that I wrote were based on my approach as a journalist. I wrote the biography of Mo Norman, so it's like narrate what went on. But this book, so I was trying to do what nonfiction coaches say to do, and that is to just write and write and write, and then worry about it later. Bringing it all together. And so I ended up writing for about, I don't know, what was 14, 16 months, and I had this freaking epic tome. And I went, wait a sec, I am not going to get this edited, and no one's going to want to read, all this words. So it just came to me. I went, you know what? There's some pretty solid practices that I have in this book. So I just went, okay, what can we do in terms of putting out something that's concrete? I tend to get into I tend to get kind of high-minded, whatever. I look at things from a very big picture aspect, and one of the things I need to do more in my life is to drill down and be more practical. And if my wife was listening to this, she'd be howling laughing right now. So it just occurred to me that there were 7 pretty solid practices that I had in that book. So I went, you know what? We're just going to focus on those, and we'll put some little stories, first person experiences between them. And it came out really nicely. I was really pleased with how it came out. It's been out for about, 18 months now. And the reception was really, really nice. And I was, from a readability standpoint, coming in at, it's 160 pages or something, 150, that it read well and stood up. And so I just learned, I think, a little bit more about let's be really practical with how we're going to do this. So there was that.
I love that. So who's the book specifically for? Who were you keeping in mind as you wrote that book and brought it all together?
Well, the book title is Getting Unstuck, 7 Transformational Practices for Golf Nerds. That's the audience. So the audience is not, someone who plays, 3-4 times a year in company tournaments, and the scramble with that type of thing, and that's all fine, that's good. But my experience as someone who's just totally obsessed deep golf nerd, I've been through the wars as a golfer, and as a coach, I've seen it, and so I went, I've got to do something to try to alleviate the suffering out there. So it's the person who, they're in an elevator and there's a mirror, and they went, oh, let me just check out my stance here a little bit, or they get back from the golf course, and their significant other, how was your day? Not very good. And they spend all afternoon fixating on what they did wrong. They're going to try and do chores around the house or outside, but the whole time they're thinking about their golf swing, and they're sneaking looks at their phone, and then they're dying to get back to the range to try and figure things out. So it's for people like that who just, they have golf in their soul. But
Mm.
that love of the game can also torment you, because you want to play at such a high level. You love the game, everything about it, but that craving, that desiring, so much of that is what in fact creates your suffering. And as the Buddhists say, it's we create our own suffering, and largely it's through that desiring, that wanting it so bad.
Really well said. Is there one key takeaway that you especially hope every reader takes from this book?
Okay. Key takeaway would be that we'll come back to the A word, awareness. If you want to change something, whatever it is in your life, in your golf, you need to have an awareness of what you actually do. And most of us do not. I mean, it happens to us all in terms of thinking, on the golf course. Something say we're going along, we're even par for 3 or 4 holes, and think, oh, maybe today's the day I break, whatever. And then next thing you know, is a double, and then a bogey, and then it's like, oh my God, I suck. What's wrong with me? Again, and the usual thing is to try and fix what's going on. It's just like a disease that golfers have. So if we have the awareness, oh, wait a sec, I'm doing that thing again. I'm ranting at myself. I'm calling myself names. I'm tense. I'm not paying attention to my partners. I'm not even, it's a beautiful day and I have zero awareness of that. But mainly I have zero awareness of what I am doing. But when you're aware, then you can change. So I'm going to look up here. So one of my favorite quotes that I use in coaching comes from Viktor Frankl, who wrote
Mhm.
an amazing book called Man's Search for Meaning. And tough read, but amazing book. So what he says, and I'm looking up at my board here where I have it, the quote against it, says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. I can't think of a much better quote that a golfer, a business person, a person in the personal relationship could take and apply to their life, so we're not captured by our habitual ways of doing things. Because most of the things that we do are defensive measures we've used since we were children to keep ourselves safe, to protect us. But at a certain point, these strategies stop working, and they become particularly apparent in golf. So when we become aware, stimulus, a double bogey, a slice, a couple of 3 putts, stimulus. Well, I have a choice on how I'm going to behave.
Yeah.
Come on, let's be some grown up people here. And then I can choose how I'm going to respond. And once we're sort of in that space of awareness of what's going on, it's called meta. It's like being aware of being aware. It's like meta awareness, and you would know that. If we could be in that space, even just a little bit, we can start to make little changes and not get caught up in those habitual behaviors as much, and start to develop some new approaches that do serve us.
Incredibly well said. For those of you listening, those last 5 minutes, absolute gold. Go back and re-listen. So Tim, I want to get you out of here on this question. One of my favorite questions to ask every guest that has chosen to join me for this fantastic conversation. I want you to imagine that centrally located on a golf course, gigantic billboard, viewable from all 18 tee boxes, and you have the opportunity to write one single last message on that billboard for all to see. What are you writing on that billboard?
Gratitude. Gratitude. Gratitude that you have the financial means to play golf. Gratitude you have a healthy body that allows you to do this. Gratitude that you can go out and swing a ball. Gratitude that you get to be on God's green earth and enjoy it and be with friends, and to to give thanks to whatever your belief system works, whether you believe, in universe, a tree, a God, whatever. When we say thank you, it brings us to present moment, which we're all seeking. You hear it over and over again, the present moment. So when we have gratitude, we're not shoulding, it should be this, or it could be another way. No, we're in this space where everything's pretty good. It may not be ideal. The rain might be coming sideways that day, but you get to be a chance and have an adventure. And to me, that's what a round of golf is. It's like, get on the first tee. It's like you and three other people, you push that raft into the river and you go along together and you get off at the 18th tee and you shake hands, and maybe you never see those people again. But you've been able to have this adventure together with other people in the world, and particularly with yourself playing an amazing game.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for joining me. I'm curious, where can our listeners go to learn more about you, connect with you, and to, of course, buy your book?
Well, thank you. Well, in terms of buying the book, Amazon, just go on there, and it's called Getting Unstuck, 7 Transformational Practices for Golf Nerds. And my website is o'connorgolf.ca. And if you're interested in reading articles about the game, about life, I write a blog on Substack, and it's tomconnor.substack.com, or just go on Substack and search for my name, Tim O'Connor, and you'll find my stuff. And I do a podcast.
Fantastic. Yes, you do.
I do. Yeah. The podcast I do with an amazing co-host named Humble Howard Glassman, who is, he's been a plus handicap a few years, and legendary broadcaster in the Ontario province, and a stand-up comedian. So we're in our 11th year now. We just did our 314th episode, I think. So it's really
Congratulations.
Fun. It's really fun. Yeah. So thanks for allowing me to shamelessly plug all the different things that I do.
Absolutely. And I'll put links in the show notes below for everybody listening. Tim, thank you so much for this enjoyable and incredibly impactful conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite. I've really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And for those of you listening, thank you for tuning in to another conversation. I know there was so much value, tangible action steps, and relatability wrapped up into the last 45, 50 minutes. Go back and listen again. Take notes, and most importantly, take action on what it is Tim has taught you here today. And if you haven't done so already, it takes 30 seconds to leave a genuine rating and review, whether that be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to today's show. Again, your ratings, your reviews give me the street cred to help have phenomenal guests just like Tim on the show. So thank you so much for doing that. Have a great rest of your day. Hit them straight this weekend, and we'll catch you in the next episode.